Hi, folks. My name is Emily Bueller O'Leary of North Fork Farms in Mazeppa, Minnesota. We are following up today on our grant through the SARE program on climate resilient pastures. We got funded through the North Central SARE office, that is Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and through the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture in order to do this planting in our silvopasture system. We are in Zone 4B in southeastern Minnesota. We run 8 to 12 cow-calf pairs depending on the year and forage availability. Then we sell grass-fed beef and pastured pork out of that system. We've got about 45 acres in pasture. We wanted to add a few more trees, so we planted 600 trees in April and May of 2024. With our SARE grant, we were looking for a couple of results. One was which fruit and nut trees can survive and which ones might even thrive in a low input Zone 4B silvopasture environment. A couple of species did all right. Species like pear and hazelnut that are common in Zone 4B actually had a lower survival and growth rates than others, but they had a pretty low sample size for us, and a couple of those were actually grafted cultivars, which generally did a lot worse in a low input silvopasture environment than seedlings themselves did. And some species were a stretch for Zone B. So northern pecan had a relatively low survival rate, only at 43%, and a low growth rate. On average, those that did survive were only at about 1.5 feet. But a few of the seedlings are really beautiful and they're pushing 3 feet and they're really healthy. So again, that's one of the reasons why we're planting seedlings, to see of all of the genetics we're able to bring in, who does well. All persimmon is another one that was a big stretch for 4B climate zone. And all of our persimmon seedlings died back over the winter, but 50% of them grew back from the root system. All of them are still under 1.5 feet, but I'm excited that we might have a few persimmon seedlings that do survive. But the real question for this kind of planting is not just who can survive, but who can thrive in this low input silvopasture environment. Serviceberry and shagbark hickory both did great as far as survival rates. Lower growth rates, they were both still under 2 feet at the end of the year. And then our superstars here are red mulberry and apple. Red mulberry had a 89% survival rate and our apple at a 71% survival rate. And they had excellent growth rates. Both of these species averaged over 4 feet tall across the planting, with several of the trees in each species reaching 7 feet tall. So that kind of growth in just 2 years is really fantastic. It's not terribly surprising that red mulberry, apple, serviceberry, and shagbark hickory are doing well. These are trees that are native to this part of Minnesota. But trees like red mulberry and shagbark hickory, we're at the very northern and northwestern part of the native growth habit for those two. So as temperatures potentially continue to warm, I think that these are great trees to have in the planting. The second big measurement that we wanted to take off of this planting was nutritional value for the leaf fodder. So the question is, do any of the fruit and nut trees that can survive, and especially those that thrive, do they produce leaf fodder with potential as a feed source for livestock? We were only able to test species with enough growth and a large enough sample size to produce 270 grams of leaves. So that's a big gallon freezer bag stuffed full without killing off the tree or trees, right? So we collected at the end of August, which would be prime drought time for our area, when we would need supplementation if we were going to drop leaf fodder in place in the pastures. We found some really interesting results. Many species that did well had a pretty low crude protein. This would be apple was only at about 9.8% or 10%. Hazelnut and hickory were both at 13.2% crude protein. But the red mulberry was fantastic. We tested the two biggest nurseries that we sourced our seedlings from. We tested those separately, and we got 18.5% crude protein from one and 19.3% crude protein from another. So that is very close to rivaling alfalfa as far as protein content. We certainly do have the question, right? Are the red mulberry seedlings that we're getting really red mulberry? Of course, there could be some hybridization with white mulberry. White mulberry has been researched extensively as a feed supplement in drought conditions at 20 and above % crude protein. So that's sort of established as a high protein feed supplement for livestock. But the question is, can red mulberry do that as well? And certainly we could have some hybridization going on in those seedlings that we got. But what we're seeing in those seedlings that were labeled red mulberry is that they are really bringing the nutritional value and the potential to support our livestock during drought. My favorite part of the project was really getting to spend more time out there in that ecosystem. It's really beautiful to spend time out there where you've got these cattle thriving, and to possibly find a way to support that feels pretty meaningful.